If you remember from the 3D program, I have the two outside housings. I have a base part, and then I have these two internal closures that trap the bottle when these housings close. So I've got some pivoting mechanisms on the bottom. I'm trying to get these two housings, when you open them, it keeps the center part where the bottle is standing on center. So it's a little bit of a mechanical feat that has to happen there. So I've built some of these parts. I didn't want to go through building everything all at once. It would take kind of forever to do that. So this is all foam core. So I made some decisions along the way about how deep the bottle is going to sit in here. So this is essentially just 3 layers of foam core. I cut the oval in 2 of the layers. So I have approximately this, I'm using the thicker foam core, which is about 3/16. So I have just under a 1/2 inch of purchase here in this cavity. And then I added another piece underneath to create the floor. And then I have this bottom piece here, which I derived from my drawing, which has these pivot points that move. And I'll show you how that works. So I assembled this, and this I'm just building. I'm just mocking this up. This isn't necessarily how this would be made in production. I'm just making it strong enough so it holds the weight, and I can check out these pivot points and see how this is going to work. So this is just a mock-up. This isn't like creating a die line for a boxboard structure. Here we can kind of do whatever we want. I'm just building this to see how this geometry works. And if everything pans out, then we'll work out the details with the vendor about how this is going to be made. Again, this will be a rigid package. It could be chipboard, it could be wrapped, it could be a wood structure. There could even be some, plastic or metal parts that make this part work down at the bottom. There's a lot of things that can happen. But this exercise is to prove out the design and to see if we all like it and share it with other designers and see how it's going to work. So we have that part ready to go. Now I have these other 2 pieces at the top. And when they come in, they're outlined here in this layout. And this is what they look like. So again, it's just foam core, and I took all the geometry from this layout, from the 3D file, and put that together, and I just bent a piece of cardboard inside here to create this negative curve. And what these 2 parts do is when they're on the 2 housings, and when they come together, they're going to trap the neck of the bottle. So when it's on the center and it's pivoting and they're in the housings, these 2 things will come around and trap this neck, and that's what holds the bottle in position. So when it opens, it pivots out like this, and it'll be accessible. So this, combined with the base, is all the internal geometry that will make this work. So I'm going to demonstrate putting all these pieces together and building the outer housings. So the outer housings, we have a back and a front panel, and I have these side curved areas, which I've created. So I took it right out of that print, and I just used some light repositional spray mount, just like we do the die lines, and put it on the foam core. Again, these aren't die lines, these are just working drawings. So it's actually a little easier than creating a die line. I don't have to worry about folding things up and having glue seams and all that. All I need are my panels and my geometry to build this. So it's a little less stressful than creating a die line and seeing it's going to fold up and work. So what I'm going to do, that back hinge that opens up, instead of making a mechanical hinge or adding an extra piece of material, I'm going to get that right out of the 1 piece of foam core. So this is going to be the back panel, and I'm going to cut a wedge cut here, which will be my hinge area. And then the front 2 panels that are going to open up, that have the opening for the logo, those are going to be in the front. So they're actually coming from the same outline and geometry here. But this one I cut in half because of the front. And this one I'm going to try to save the material in the back and use that as a hinge. So this takes a little practice. I'm going to create a wedge cut here. It's going to be approximately 90 degrees, 45 degrees per side. So when it opens up, it gives us that nice V opening. So this is just an example of how to try to accomplish that. So I'm just estimating from that's the center line. I'm going to cut along here, but I'm going to take my blade and I'm going to put this on an angle and try to create this wedge cut in here. So I am just guessing about how this might work. I've done this before, so it should work. So nice and easy. I'm trying to keep this angle as consistent as possible. I do not want to go through the material. I don't want to go through the back. I want to keep that piece of paper on the back intact, and that'll ultimately become my hinge. So if I do this on both sides, and again, I'm estimating here, if I do approximately the same, I have to allow for the thickness of this metal. If I were to use this triangle, it's thicker plastic, I would have to allow for more tolerance, because if I lean against this plastic, the actual cut is quite a bit further from here because of the thickness of that plastic. So this ruler is pretty thin, so I am getting pretty close like this. I'm going to hold this nice and firm, keep my fingers out of the way, and I'm going to try to create this V cut on this side. So I know I have that oval hole in the middle here. The only reason that's there is because I used the same layout for the front and the back. I didn't duplicate that. So that is not going to be part of this piece. Okay, so that's still in there. So I'm just going to go back. Oops. And very gently try to relieve all that foam on the inside there. I'll do that on both sides. I might be here. Nope, that's just the paper on top. So let's just take that off. So foam core is a little forgiving at times because it does give and it squeezes and things like that. So if I'm not perfectly accurate on these 245s to create this little wedge, I could probably push it a little bit and squeeze the foam and get that to work. Okay. So I didn't go, I drew the lines on the back. I want to hang on to, I always love to hang on to center lines, even when I'm working in 3D. Keeping the center lines so we know exactly where the middle of things are. So when I start to assemble these things, I don't lose track of that geometry. So now I've got this fold here. So this looks pretty good. Slightly off center there. But you can see I have a 90-degree. Not bad. And I can even go a little bit further. So that sits quite nice right there. All right, so that worked. And the foam is giving in the center. And it comes right to the middle. Okay, so that cut turned out really well. So I can peel off this. Again, I put this on with repositional spray mount, just like when we do the die lines. Now I have this part, which is quite nice and ready to go. And again, it hung onto my center points on the back. I don't even know if I need this, but I'm going to bring that information over onto this panel. Because I always quite often find out, like, oh, I wish I knew where that center line is, and I'm in the middle of gluing something. It'd be nice to have all of that information ready. Again, this is just a functioning mock-up. So having pencil lines and construction lines on it are actually quite beneficial to help communicate to everybody how this works. Okay, so that's great, that worked out. So that's the back with the hinge. Because what I'm gonna do is, the rest of the structure is gonna be towards you, and I'm gonna have the V cut in the back. I want that to come around so that geometry stays nice and clean, and that maintains a perfect center point for the rest of the parts. So now we have to glue this all together. So I have these. The oval is not on center because of how it's positioned on the bottle, so that's fine. I do have my center line though, so I know where I'm working. These are the side panels. So I prepared these because I didn't want you to sit here and watch me do all these curve cuts. So all these little cuts. So this is very flexible in this one axis. It's almost like creating single face corrugated board. So I cut it to the width. I picked a 1/4 inch clearance because this is a very gentle curve. So when I glue this together, This will flex very nicely without a lot of resistance, and I created my end panel, integrated that with this piece. So I'm going to glue that together. So here I'm going to take advantage of those center points. I'm going to start from the center. This is quite a large glue seam and these ends to do all at the same time. It can be done, but it's a bit challenging. So I'm going to step into this a little bit slower. And maybe I'll do it from this side, so you can see from there. So I have this little X, that's the center of this panel. It's the center of all these perf cuts. Everything is symmetrical this way. And I have this center line on this panel. So I think I will make this assembly from this side. So I can show you how I do this. So I have my little center line on this mark. So I could put glue on that entire seam and do this, but let's do it in steps. So I have a little bit more time to breathe in between when I do these, and you'll see what I mean, because we need to get that to hold. Everything has to be perfectly in position. So I'm going to be gluing this down here, and I'm going to do one side at a time, and then I'm going to use a little bit of tape to hold that, and then I'm going to do the other side. So I'm just going to add a bead of glue along here. Don't need a lot. We really don't want too much of this to get all over the surfaces. So there's my center line. I'm going to put this right on the center, and I have that delineated back here. I'm going to get that right on the edge as best I can. Get some glue on my fingers already. And I'm going to bring this part up. So all those perf cuts make it so there's not a lot of resistance, which is nice. I want to keep that as clean as possible. So now I'm picking this up and I'm holding it. I have some glue oozing out, so I'm just going to take that glue off very quickly. I have little pieces of paper towel handy. Just going to push that and line that up. So quite often I'll use tape, almost like a clamp. I'm going to put a little bit of tape right on this edge, just to hold that in position right there. So now I can move my hand over, constantly removing that glue. Kind of want to keep this clean. And I'm going to put another piece over here. Not too much, because the foam does crush, so we don't want to put too much pressure on that. I'm just going to put another piece right here in the center and make sure that that stays nice. Right there. And then we have glue on the end. So since I integrated this, I did another V cut here, just like the V cut I just demonstrated. It's not quite a 90 degrees, so it's a little less. But I'm going to bring that right around the corner and hold that at the top. So that's nice and clean right there. And then that will get a piece of tape right there to hold that down. Get rid of some of that glue. So that's working very nicely. It's very clean. Everything is lining up. Now I can take a moment. If I had to do this side at the same time, it could be done. And maybe we'll do the next one all at once. I just want to show you a way to do it so it's not so overwhelming, because it can be a lot. And then when things don't line up and the glue gets smeared all over the place, and it can get a little challenging. So the thing here is I got to get some glue in here now. So if I don't get enough glue up in here, that should be okay. So I'm going to start to get the glue down here as much as I can. So I'm just pushing that up with my finger inside, and I'm going to get that glue up there as much as I can. Again, not too much. I'm doing a little bit too much because it is oozing out. During my woodworking experience, I mean, having the glue ooze out enough really tells you that there's enough glue in that wood joint. So this is kind of similar here. We want to make sure we have enough going on in there. So I'm just going to continue that process around the corner. Make sure everything lines up. Push that into position. Okay, so that glue is holding nicely. tape works well is like a clamp. Can just pull that in, hold that nice and tight. And then I'll bring the top around. So I left a little extra material on the top. That's an edge I can trim later. I always like to leave a little bit. I was actually pretty close there. I should have left a little more, just in case I'm a little off center. I misjudged on the perf cuts and how they're gonna fold and all that. Because sometimes I'll do this, elaborate piece, and then all of a sudden I'll be short, and it's very frustrating. So I can cut that off later. So that's actually fine to have that extra material there. So that's the start of the one of the front components. I believe the oval sits low on this here. So that's the beginning of that front. And we're going to do that on both sides. And then I'm going to add this part with the hinge in the back. So we're going to glue this in here, and that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get that all to go in at once. And that's how this starts to form here. So let's continue with that. So this one I'm going to do all in one shot. So I'm going to get some more tape ready. I try to get these little tape sections ready to go so I don't have to be pulling tape off while I'm holding the part. So it's a good idea to have several of these ready. Okay, that should be good. Okay, like I'd mentioned, the hinge is going to be in the back of the box. So I have to make sure that I want that in the back, and then this will be the actual front of the box. Actually, the front of the back of the box inside. So it's a matter of getting all this glue in all these areas and putting this all together all at the same time. So here's an example of doing this all in one shot. So I'm going to move quickly. I'm putting the bead on this perf cut area, and I'm going to put it on the ends. Now I have my center points aligned with this also, so I'm going to do it from this direction. So I have my center point back here, and I'm going to drop this in the center. I'm going to spread this out slightly so I can get that down in there. I'm going to get that piece right on center. Lift this up so we can see from this side. Yep. So I want to push this into position, keeping that on center. So that's working. So I'm going to actually start on the end here. It might be a little easier to keep these parts organized. I'm going to take that. I'm going to push this along as I go. I'm right on center here, which is great. That's why I have those center lines there to make sure that I'm staying right on center. So I'm going to go to this end. Push that in pretty tight without distorting that radius too much. I don't want to pull that too tight. So I'm just going to make sure I pull that in to here. Again, I have extra material. I just have to pull a little too tight there. Okay, so I'll just do one of these right in the middle. Don't pull too much. So I'm pulling on the foam there slightly. Kind of leave this off. I don't want to destroy the surface of that material when I pull the tape off. So just enough to get that to hold. Keep that clean. Okay, so that's 1/2 of the structure. A little bit of a gap right there. I could put some more tape. Let's just see if I can push that in. Okay, I can see a little bit of material I'm going to remove there, but it looks pretty clean. Looks good. Now all my perf cuts are on the inside. An older way of doing that was doing perfs on the outside to relieve the material. But I want to keep this really nice and clean and smooth. It's a gentle arc, so there's no reason to do that. I could probably actually create this arc with 1/8" foam core because it's so thin without any perf cuts. Just do that, but I wanted to maintain the thickness of the material. So once I'm working with several axes here now. I have all 3 axes, which we've talked about. I've got this plane, I got that plane, and then we have this curved plane. The curved plane really helps make this quite strong. So this is going to be a really nice part. And then I have the integrated hinge, which is going to work well. So actually I should clean this all up before I create the other part. I might have to break this into 2 tutorials because that'll take a little extra time there. So it's the same process. Let's just keep track of what I'm doing. I have, this needs to line up, and I need to put that into this part in this orientation. I don't want to do this and have it go this way, and it's not going to line up. So I need to just keep track for a moment and make sure this is how it's going to work. So let's put this part to the side, and then I'm going to repeat this procedure on this particular one. That's okay. It's clean. So now we're back to wanting to be able to set this up. Around this other flap. Let's do it from out here. So again, I'm just doing a dry run without any glue to see how this is going to fit. So not bad, a little tight here. I could set this up and glue it in its open orientation so I can clean up those 2 joints. Got the ovals lining up. So this is the beginning of how that articulation is going to work. Okay, in the last tutorial I just finished the gluing and got it all set up. So now we have this nice closure, and I have this integrated hinge in the back. So this is a bit elaborate. It's got this functionality. We have some curved shapes. So this lends itself to being manufactured in several different ways. It can be done with chipboard and rigid materials and then wrapped. But since it's holding quite a bit of weight, and this is a relatively high price point, this could be made out of wood. You start to get involved with cabinetry making techniques, you know, actual mechanical hinges and things like that. And I got these pivot points working. So when you get involved with rigid packaging, it really is quite open-ended. It depends on budgets and what kind of product we're holding and what the functionality is. So this is pushing the envelope a little bit with mechanics and materials and processes. But I wanted to show this as a demonstration. I do have another tutorial on the fundamentals of creating a rigid box tray, which is a very simplified version. That would be on the other end of the scale, something like this. So we could also take a look at that. So this is our outside housing, and I had built the other components that go inside. So we have these 2 pieces that go in the top that trap the bottle component, which is where the bottle sits in. And I have these slots in here that I'm going to show how that's going to work. And I'm going to have the pivot point and then these 2 sliding points, which all came from the 3D file in developing this geometry about how this is going to work. So for this bottom part, I had to put 2 holes in there that lined up with these 2 slots. And I'm going to show that assembly. It's a little bit challenging because I didn't really figure out how I was going to get in there and get all those points to work. So let's start with the easy part. These parts just slip in the top, and they happen to be friction fit, which is quite nice. So just to see how this is going to work. And there's one on each side. So they just sit in there nicely. So that's just going to close and trap the top of the bottle. Everything fits in there quite nice. And I get my opening, which is a good 90 degrees, 45 per side. So that's where all this articulation is going to happen, and the bottom is going to allow this to happen. So let's see if I can put this together. Relatively easy. Again, this is not for manufacturing, but I do have these little aluminum post screws, they're called. It's basically, it's not really a nut, but it's a post with a hollow thread pattern, and then the thread pattern fits in. So these are quite easy to use. I mean, you can even get these at Home Depot and office supply stores. They will sell these things. So this is just to demonstrate how this is going to work. So I have to get in there behind this and get this inside that opening. So this is a little challenging. Let's see if I can do this. Let's do. Okay. Okay, so what happens is I have those two lined up. And when you open this, it's kind of a self-centering. So when you open it up to the max, it sets that up. And a little happy accident that happened when I do it all the way and I push that, it actually brings the platform forward slightly and it creates almost like a stop, which locks this open. So when you close, you press in, disengage that, and it brings it back to zero. So that's just a way to take a look at this. So again, this is a part of the discovery process on how to get this to work. So the bottle sits in the platform. I have those little screw heads on the bottom, so there's going to need to be some kind of relief so they're not sitting right on the deck. So I'm going to work out some of those details to get this to function correctly. So from your point of view, you can set that in and you can see how this comes in and locks that. I have this nice opening which reveals the label on the inside. So this holds pretty well. I think I might develop some kind of a nice unique little latch mechanism here that would be a bit decorative, maybe brand centric or some kind of a beautiful detail to lock this in here. So I think that works pretty well. So again, I would add some material, a relief here to cover these so they're not exposed, scratching any kind of surface, have a nice little footprint on the bottom there. So I need to integrate that into the design. And then again, speaking to a vendor, there might be some challenges. He might say, absolutely no way, I can't make this the way you've designed it. But then that's part of the negotiation process. So just by opening this up, get this nice product reveal. So it's a little staging center. This is a relatively expensive product. So this price point would warrant a structure like this. Okay, I will bring this into class and I'll demonstrate some of the other features about how to make this.